Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and I'm going to try and answer this simple question. How is the world going to change tomorrow when Donald Trump swears in and becomes the 47th president of the United States of America? How is the world going to change? Is it going to be transformed? Is there going to be chaos and anarchy? Are there going to be more wars? Is there going to be more peace? What is going to happen? So I'm going to try and share with you very briefly. I don't want to pontificate, because I think one thing that is certain, if there is anything certain about Donald Trump's second term, is it's going to be unpredictable. So I'm going to try to do the unpredictable, try and predict the unpredictable. So I'm going to identify 5 ways in which I think the world is going to change broadly. And to keep these things in mind, if you are a policymaker, either in the United States or overseas, and are trying to respond, react, and anticipate policies coming out of Washington, D.C. But before that, please subscribe to Khanversations, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this with your socio-political network. And if you want to support it, you can do so by becoming a member of this channel. So the first thing that I want to say is there is going to be no order as such. You know, one of the big things about American foreign policy is global order, about sustaining this neoliberal global order based on what Biden kept talking about, rule-based order, that there are rules that determine the interaction between countries in the international arena. And so this rule-based order was quite important for the Biden administration, as it was for the Obama administration, and to a great extent even to the George W. Bush administration, that yes, there's an international system out there. But I don't think that Donald Trump is interested in either creating a new global order or sustaining the existing one. He finds that the existing global order has done more to undermine the US and allowed other countries like China and other countries in the world to take advantage, especially Western allies in Europe. So Europe and China have taken advantage of the United States and have grown at the expense of the United States. So he sees this existing global order as something that has not really served US interests. So he has no interest in sustaining and perpetuating this global order. That does not mean that he has a vision for an alternative global order. He doesn't. I don't think he thinks that way. So he's not trying to say that we need to tweak the international system in this way to go here, or we need to replace this order with this. He doesn't care about that. So how does his mind work on this global order? So if you look at, when we talk about global order, there are 2 things. There are 2 elements to the global order. One is the rules and norms and values and principles, and even to some extent, the laws, international laws, which more or less guide the international system. So the system has one element, which is we call rules. And the other system is essentially power and the distribution of power, the relative distribution of power. So if you're a more powerful country, they're less likely that the rules and regulations will apply to you. If you're less powerful, then the rules and regulations really begin to constrain your actions, etc. So the international law suddenly becomes very serious to you if you are the president of Sudan than if you are the prime minister of Israel. So some countries can violate international norms, like the US and its invasion of Iraq. So under Donald Trump, I think he's going to pay less attention to the rules, norms, and international law and international principles that undergird the international system, but he's going to focus more on the power aspect. And the fact that the United States is the most powerful country, the biggest economy, is going to be, he sees this as a huge advantage for him to basically escape the existing global order that allows other countries to exploit. And so he's going to use this power of the United States to eliminate those aspects, those norms and principles and practices of the international order, which allow countries to exploit the United States. So that is what is going to happen. And you must understand everything that I'm saying about this first manner in which the world is going to change tomorrow. by also thinking about the second aspect, which I'm going to talk about. So the first aspect is that global order is not going to matter as much. The second thing is that two elements are going to be very important that you need to keep in mind, which is that everything coming out of Washington, there will be uncertainty, unpredictability, inconsistency uh, in policies. So don't expect Trump to articulate a principle in 2025 and then expect him to be consistent in that particular principle that he has himself articulated. No, he could change within 24 hours. So there is an unpredictability to his policy making. Like, for example, nobody thought that he would suddenly want to acquire the Panama Canal and Greenland. It went from being a joke to semi-serious discussion if Canada can become the 51st state of the United States, and then it's quite possible that we will never hear of it again. So there's going to be all this inconsistency, a lot of noise that is going to distract from actual policy. So these are going to be some aspects that there is going to be no, for those who study international relations, one of the aspects of discussion of regime theory is that there is that you can expect certain kinds of practices, even though they are not written down and they are not rules and laws. But because of the practices, because a certain kind of regime exists, you can expect some consistency. That is not going to happen. So you have to be constantly on the alert. It's going to be very difficult for countries to plan ahead on dealing with the United States because of the uncertainty and inconsistency of the policy. So he could have a negotiations with you, and then he could completely switch when something else tempts him and his and because he has hired a lot of loyalists in his administration, they're going to do whatever he wants. So he's not going to get any resistance from inside his own administration as it did during the first term. And there were people there was this assumption that there are adults in the White House who are going to constrain Donald Trump. Now there are going to be no babysitters. There are going to be people who are going to jump every time he says do this and do that. So the second aspect in which the world is going to change is that the dominant player in the international system is going to be inconsistent, unpredictable, and there will be more whimsical policy making than thoughtful and prudent. The third change that is going to happen, and it's going to be quite significant contrast from the way the world was under Joe Biden. And the contrast is going to be that the last 2 years, American foreign policy and a lot of the international discourse was dominated by geopolitics. The two wars being fought in two different regions of the world that are so critical to America. So America has been essentially struggling or fighting to retain its hegemony in Europe and in the Middle East. And it is fighting its enemies, Iran, and its proxies in the Middle East, and is fighting Russia in Europe to essentially sustain Western hegemony and US hegemony in the region. So the last 2 years, more or less, of Joe Biden have been preoccupied by geopolitics. What is going to change is that we are going to shift from geopolitics to geoeconomics. So Donald Trump is going to try and end both the wars. He does not want to prolong these wars, and he doesn't really care. He's going to tell Ukrainians, stop fighting, accept the status quo, and he's going to tell Russia that you also stop fighting. It's what you won, you keep, and we will end this war. I'm not going to fund this war anymore, and I'm not. If the Europeans want to do it, I will punish them, and the way he's going to punish them is by essentially making NATO less and less significant. So the Europeans are going to be dealing. He might even use tariffs against Europe if Europe continues to keep this war going after Trump says end this war. So in that sense, you can argue that he's going to end the importance of geopolitics and begin geoeconomics. So there's going to be more geoeconomics and less geopolitics, I think, under the Donald Trump administration. So if there's anything consistent that is going to be, this is going to be, I mean, very broadly speaking, even in issues where it may appear it's being geopolitical and even expansionist, like trying to take over the Panama Canal or taking over Greenland. These are also issues which are essentially triggered by geoeconomic considerations, and they are not geopolitical. He's not thinking of taking over Greenland because it's going to give him some geopolitical advantage over his enemies. He wants to take over Greenland because it can be an economic advantage to the United States. The fourth element, I think, is that he is going to accelerate deglobalization. So these mercantilist policies that he is going to pursue is going to completely disrupt the existing supply chains with regards. Already that has begun to happen as countries are going into offshoring, nearshoring, friendshoring. There's globalization, the redirection of foreign direct investments. Now, hardly any foreign direct investments are going to China. Most of them are coming to the United States, which I'm sure Trump will like. So there is going to be this kind of, it's like saying that he's going to bend and even maybe break the world that globalization created in his effort to bring back manufacturing to the United States, because he thinks that that is the real source of power in the United States. And if he doesn't achieve that, then he would consider his presidency, I guess, a failure. So the fourth change that you can see is the dismantling of globalization as we know it. And you may call it re-globalization or not, but it's going to be extremely mercantilist. We're going to get into a world where countries are going to be driven primarily not so much by territorial and other security concerns, but more by geoeconomic and political economy related concerns. There is also going to be less attention, I think, to environment and more attention to basically the distribution of wealth. And I think he is going to think of power more in terms of wealth. Fifth aspect of this is that it is quite possible that this so-called Western alliance, this transatlantic partnership, which has since the end of World War II been the dominant, shall we say, coalition that has governed the world, so to speak. So in partnership with Europe, the United States has created this multilateral world order in which the US interests and Western interests have dominated the global agenda. We have often heard the foreign minister of India, Dr. Jaishankar, where he has criticized, and he says Europe behaves as if Europe's problems are the world's problems, and the world's problems are not Europe's problems. And so that is because of the hegemonic domination of this transatlantic partnership. And it appears that Trump doesn't really care for it. So the biggest, I think, international change that Trump might make, which could endure beyond his presidency, is the blows he might strike against this transnational partnership. And I think that the way geopolitics is going on with the growth and expansion of BRICS, you might see that certain powers which are non-Western coming closer and closer, and Western powers diverging from each other, especially Europe from the US. And then in Europe, the liberal states versus the populist states, the more pro-Russia states like Hungary and others moving away from, say, France and Britain. So you're going to see this kind of sort of fragmentation of the Western alliance as a result of Donald Trump's agenda, which is independent of European interests. He's not going to let European interests dominate American foreign policy, as Joe Biden has done. In fact, Joe Biden's entire foreign policy was Israel first, Ukraine second, Europe third. There was no advocacy of US interests at all. That is not going to happen under the Donald Trump administration. So I think the world is going to change significantly. The way nations deal with the United States, the way the United States deal with other nations. And as a result of this, the way countries deal with each other under the so-called shadow of the Donald Trump 2.0 presidency is going to be significantly different, unpredictable, uncertain, and definitely not orderly. So I think these are the 5 changes that are going to take place tomorrow. It makes me uncomfortable, but it also makes me exciting because I'll have a lot more interesting things to talk about on Khanversations. So please make sure that you stay tuned in, subscribe to Khanversations, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with your socio-political network. Until next time, I'm your host, Muqtedar Khan. Take care.